Hi there. I am Dr. Loren M. Hill, your academic career advancement coach. And today I am so honored to have with me one of my colleagues, Dr. Tanya D. Armstrong. And today we're going to talk a bit about balancing productivity, your purpose, and then wellness on the academic journey. And listen, you all, you know, I'm honest with you, and we will get there. It is a journey, but it's small steps, and it's bringing in experts like Dr. Armstrong to help us define what that looks like for ourselves and see, how to balance, how to be well, and how to continue on our journey, as well as finding our purpose, right? So, a little bit about Dr. Armstrong. She is an international speaker, just highly sought out, and her areas of expertise include health and wellness. She's an entrepreneur, she's a psychologist, she's a consultant, she's an author, she's a singer, she's a songwriter. I mean, look, I could go on, but what I'll do is just bring her in so we can start this rich conversation. Welcome, Dr. Armstrong.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. It's a pleasure to be here with you and have this discussion.
Okay, so tell us about it. How did you find your purpose, and how is your purpose, seen throughout your career, which is quite illustrious and extensive? Tell us a bit about that.
Wow. So I recall at the age of 12, I was um, required to take the SAT to compete for Duke University's TIP program.
Mm,
And so, when you take the SAT, they ask you what your major will be.
yes.
And at 12, I put on that document that I wanted to major in psychology and music. And fast forward 9 years, and that was exactly what I did. And so I even look back at that moment with awe because I cannot tell you that there was a natural way that I knew
Mm,
that those were the areas that were calling me. But indeed, those have been woven throughout my career. And so I do believe that purpose is something that is a spiritual matter, that it is something that is often given to us. And I certainly believe that there are times that we also can pursue those
mhm.
things in which we have interest. But even before I really knew the implications of being a psychologist or a musician, I knew that I was called into those arenas. So I think it's important to pay attention to that inner voice that is directing us to our purpose.
Mm. So I really resonate with what you said, just particularly that last sentence. Resonate with your inner voice,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So many times in my personal life and in my experience working with others, particularly women and those from uh, certain marginalized communities. And I even, that even sticks in my throat every time I say it, but just for context,
Sure.
we have this inner voice or this inner knowing, but society seems to invalidate us. Um, and so I'm wondering if that is the case, and I believe I'm not the only one who's experienced that. How do we honor our inner voice and stay balanced and well and have a healthy career and all of those other things?
hmm Great question. It is a question that I answer or help clients to answer all the time. And that is, I believe the way that we can most attuned to that inner voice is that we have to nurture it. We have to focus on it because of the things that we focus on expand. So
Mm,
to the degree that life keeps lifing and we don't have space for that voice, it's going to kind of dissipate and fade. But to the degree that we honor that voice, that we give time and attention to it, it will grow. And so for me, that looks like acknowledging every morning my creator,
mm,
acknowledging that there is purpose to each day, acknowledging that there are certain resources that I need for each day, and I have to get some clarity about what that is before I move forward with the day. And so I have to put that first. And I know that there are other people's journeys that very legitimately have other spaces, maybe in the evening before bed, but for me, it has to happen every morning. And across the different transitions of my life, as I've become a mother and had changes in employment, that time has ebbed and flowed. Sometimes it's a longer period of time. Sometimes it's just a few moments, but I really try to prioritize being able to make the space to be still, to listen to that inner voice, which for me is connected to a higher power. But I think we all have that voice that is giving us a way to move forward if we will listen to it.
So I really appreciate you giving your personal examples of how you're able to honor your voice. And I think that, it may be helpful for people to just consider ways in which they can be still and hear that voice, right?
Yes.
When we think about some of the research in the area of women's ways of knowing, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what what do you think about that research, and how can some of that research help guide us? Now, although it is women's ways of knowing, it's not exclusive to women, but that is just the research body, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there are ways that our family, our ancestors, our sister colleagues, even throughout history, have pointed us to those ways of knowing.
Mhm.
And I connect that, if you will, that sort of intuitive sense of knowing with research that also teaches us about the importance of mindfulness. And so I see those as seamless. I don't see that, okay, this is what folk wisdom says, and separately, this is what science says. I see them being very compatible. And we know that all together, when we look at the sort of summary of what we learn, we know that being focused on being mindful is such an important way of knowing ourselves. And mindfulness has not always been the key word. There are other terms that we've used through time. So I'd like to give examples of
Sure.
what I mean when I talk about mindfulness. One way that we can be mindful is to engage in meditation. There
Mhm.
are so many resources available now that were not available even a decade ago, at our fingertips on our phones, where we can actually have a structure and a format for practicing meditation, for
Mhm.
quieting ourselves and being still. There is also a way of being mindful, and I should clarify that when we're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about being fully present in the moment, in the present moment, not in the past, not
Mm.
concerned about the future, but just in that moment, taking in what it is that we are contemplating. And I had a colleague in my practice who once guided us through a mindfulness exercise. We were actually having a retreat, and she engaged us by passing out raisins, and we
Mm.
each got to take that raisin and to consume it mindfully meant that it took us about 3 to 5 minutes to
Mm,
eat that one raisin,
mm,
because she was directing us to pay attention to all of the features of the raisin, how it looked and how it felt on our tongues and how it tasted and what it sounded like to chew it and so forth. And so sometimes that is the opposite of what we're doing, right? We
right.
are already, both perhaps experiencing baggage from the past, or we're already worried about the future, but mindfulness just gets us grounded. So, meditation, prayer, times of being still, those are all ways that we can, sometimes in solitude, but sometimes even in traffic, doing some
Mm,
deep breathing in
mm.
our cars can be ways of really focusing our minds for clarity on that inner voice.
So I love that raisin exercise. I'm like, ooh, let me get over there to my pantry and do that, right? And how, something as small as a raisin, but even as you were saying that, I was like, raisins are so, they have so much texture on them, and
Mhm.
they're very fragrant, and then they have their own unique taste, and they look a particular way. So already I was there, me,
Yes,
my raisin, right?
yes, yes,
And
exactly.
so I also appreciate you taking us through the process of mindfulness, right? That you really, people, I too have a specialty in positive psychology. And sometimes people push back from, well, mindfulness and woo woo and this and that. And I say to them, even if you just strip away all of the titles and the framework, we have to have that, so we have shared language, right? We have to kind
That's
of
right.
know what the construct is. But if you take all that away, is simply not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, and thinking about where you are right now in this very moment, right?
Yes.
And when you're able to do that and become focused on the moment, in my experience, I've had bursts of clarity. And then you think about your vision, you think about your purpose, you think about your career, you think about your all of these things that are going on. They kind of suspend, and you're able to kind of look at them and then pull in what you want to really spend some time on. We can't change the past, right? But we can learn from it. We don't know what's
Exactly.
going to happen in the future, but we can plan for it, right? And
Exactly.
so being mindful helps us with that. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. Yes, it is so important for us to sometimes just, as you say, strip away all of the non-essential parts and get really to the essence of what it means. And I think we all can resonate with the fact that engaging in a mindful practice for even 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a big difference.
Sure. So let's think about, now we've got our mindfulness practice. We've, set aside some alone time, whether it's, as you said, in the restroom by yourself, or over in the corner before anybody else gets up, or in the evening after everybody's gone to bed, or in traffic. Whatever you want to do, whatever is best for you, just so you kind of lean into that. How will that impact your productivity and help you with your career journey?
Hmm. Yes, that's a great question. I find that during my stint in academia, that there were 1,000,001 opportunities, if we want to use that term. There are always more things to do than there are, windows of time to do them. And so I think it is very important, and I have learned this personally over my career, that we have to be clear about our purpose.
Mm,
There are many voices that are influencing the ways that we might be spending our time and creating priorities. So we may have in our ear those words of our parents or family members.
mhm,
Perhaps there are words of guidance from colleagues, what they see in us, or advisors, mentors telling us, oh, you should do this. We could do that, you know?
mhm,
And I think that those things are valuable because we indeed have blind spots and we're not able to always see what our strengths and talents are. But again, it goes back to that inner voice. We want to combine the best of what it is that we've heard from others. Look also at the inner wisdom of what am I really called to in this moment, in this season. And with that increased clarity, it helps us to resist being engaged in other activities that are not going to bring us to a fulfillment of the purpose that we've already identified.
mm. That is really good advice. And when I'm working with people, I often let them know and, really highlight how many times people will invite you in to do things, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's just, that's a great thing, actually, as you said, the opportunities, choices, and usually they're for the most part, they're inviting you in because they see something in you that, oh, you are an asset, right? And so we like to think that people are doing this really for, good intention, and we'll just leave it there, right? Whatever their motivation is, you really have to be mindful about how that aligns with your vision, mission, purpose, goals, etc. Right? So we do have, as faculty and as administrators, we have the contractual obligations, right? So yes, we got to do those. That's non-negotiable, kind of. We can always, figure something out. But all of that extra stuff, we need to be thinking about that. And I've I have found that not just for me, but for others, and the research bears this out, so it's not just my bias, but in terms of gender, women are asked to do more than their male counterparts. Women are conditioned by society and culture to say yes when asked. And so really being mindful about how to say no and when to say yes is an important aspect of, I think your balance and wellness, right, Dr.
Yes,
Armstrong?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you are allowing other people, however well intentioned they may be, to set the agenda for how you are using your time and moving or not moving towards your purpose, then you may be obscuring your own path to that purpose. And so I have found that the more I mature, the more regularly I have to resort back to, okay, now what did I say my purpose was? What
Mm,
did I say my 2024 commitments would be? How am I using my time? Am I aligning with what the projected use of my time would be? And I find that the closer I keep an eye on that, the more I'm able to make adjustments and to say no and to be able to live with the no. You know,
mm.
sometimes we feel like we have to justify a no, but when it really comes deeply from within, you know that whatever else you're saying yes to is going to really further you.
So I just had a little laugh because the whole thing about justifying no is that I love that, millennials will be like, no is a full sentence or no full stop. And so I have really taken that in because you're right. If you were brought up in a certain culture, or you are whatever that other stuff that goes on, those voices or those looks, like when you said no, but I don't believe you, right? And so we just are like, well, no, and here's why. And so
Mhm.
no should just mean no, and people
Mhm.
should be okay with that, right?
Mhm.
So everything you've said, Dr. Armstrong, it sounds very strategic.
Mhm.
So talk a bit about what it's like to be strategic, live in strategy, because you said, does this align with my 2024 projections, commitments, with purpose? So that rolled off your tongue very easily. And so as a strategist, I said, oh, wait a minute, I see you. So let's talk to the people about strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when we have been talking about purpose, that sort of sets the blueprint, if you will.
Mm,
And then we all know that we can't exist and live in a world with only blueprints. The
mm,
blueprint is the beginning phase, but ultimately, to use a housing metaphor, we want to have a structure that
yes.
we can live in. And so the structure that we will construct after we have the blueprint is formed by strategy. And I find that part of taking a larger purpose, imposing a strategy, and then being able to execute the strategy has
Mhm,
everything to do with your plan.
mhm,
And I think that the plan for the year also needs to be dissected into the plan for the month, the
mhm,
plan for the week, the plan for the day.
mhm,
And particularly during my years in academia, I think that I did not yet have the knowledge or the life experience to be able to recognize that I not only needed a plan for how I was going to get my articles published.
okay.
I did get some guidance on that, but I didn't have so much of a plan of how I was going to increase my parenting skills. I didn't have a plan for how I was going to stay on track with my financial goals. I
Mhm,
didn't necessarily have a plan for, how it was that I was going to maintain my physical fitness or reach my nutrition goals. So I find that now that I'm much more focused on wellness and wholeness, that I have to take a 360 and I have to be able to monitor my progress with a plan. So even now, there are days when I don't have a plan
mhm,
of in a particular area. And as a result, I'm like, well, I could make a last minute plan, but I'd have to do some acrobatics and back bends to make that happen. So
mhm,
that's probably not going to happen today,
mhm,
right? Versus, okay, here's the plan for what my fitness is going to look like today. Or
mhm,
here's the plan for making sure that by the end of the day, said I'm set up to have some good rest. So I do find that our strategy needs to be buttressed by having plans in those areas.
mhm. So I know people are listening to this and going, okay, Dr. Armstrong is an advanced strategist, and I'm not there yet.
I receive it.
Because I was listening to something, I was like, okay, yeah, well, I need to get a plan for this, that, and the other, right? Fitness being one of them.
Hmm.
So if we're starting out, right? So we are okay, we hear you about the mindfulness, we understand the inner voice that we're nurturing. It was, it's almost gone, but it's there. So I'm getting it up again. I'm thinking about the yes and the no and the maybe. And now you're talking to me about a plan and a strategy and a blueprint and a structure. Where do I start? How do I get this going? Because fall term is about to start in a month or two, and I got to get ready to go in here and run this campus or teach these students. And
Yes,
husband,
yes,
dog, come on now. Where do we start?
exactly, exactly. And certainly it can be daunting even just to hear all of this and think, I don't know where to start. So what I would advise is, I would venture a guess that your listeners already have a decently intact plan for how they will succeed in academia.
Mhm.
Presumably, they have uh, advisors, they have mentors, they have supported colleagues, they have great podcasts like yours to be able to say, okay, here's how we do that part. So it may not be exactly where they want it to be, but that's probably pretty far along, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't have donated all the blood, sweat, and tears to get to the academic post that they have. So they got a lot of that figured out. So
Yes.
then the next step would be, what's a priority? What would be a really high priority outside of my academic work? And I think sometimes life helps to dictate that for us. It gives us clarity. So it may be that we had a recent doctor's visit and we found out that, oh, I need to work on this, or the doctor says these levels are high. And
Mhm.
so that would give clarity that, okay, in addition to making sure I'm academically on track, let me also make sure that from a physical standpoint, that if the doctor is saying I need to change my diet or I need to lose weight or stay more active, that is absolutely the very next thing. And I think that we all have heard at least of SMART goals. And so sometimes when we have a priority, like increase my nutrition, and we have a SMART goal that actually helps us to know how to make a goal around nutrition that is specific and that is measurable, and all of the acronyms that we're then able to say, okay, for the next semester, this is the thing. I'm going
Mhm.
to work and I'm going to focus on nutrition. And these are the ways that I'm going to focus on nutrition. Now, yes, the doctor said I might need to, get engaged in fitness, or yes, there's this change in my household. I now have an empty nest, or I now have these young children. Yeah, I'll get to those strategies, but this is my next strategy that I'm going to focus on. And I think we really do have to, even though we juggle a lot, it helps to focus on one at a time and make sure we really are comfortable with that ball before we add others.
Mhm. So that is really great advice. And I really think people need to hear that you need to do something for yourself outside of work first, right?
Yes, yes,
Because yes, you got the job, or you're getting the job, or you're gonna get one, right?
right,
That's a given, right?
right. Hmm.
Late or whatever. However, you got one you, and you have to think about you as a whole person, which is sometimes difficult to do when we got all of this other stuff. Life is lifing, right?
That's right.
But one thing you have to do is think about yourself. You mentioned the doctor's visit, right? Please, everybody, annual physical exam. Blood
Absolutely.
work can tell you a lot about what's going on internally, right? You and I are behavioral health specialists. I wish that we also had, an annual mental wellness checkup,
I love
right?
it.
And
Yes,
so, if you can't do that, then do it on your own, right? If you can't get to a therapist or a counselor just to talk, right? You don't have to go to any wellness practitioner, whether that's your family practice or your behavioral health specialist. You don't have to wait till something's wrong to go,
exactly.
right?
Yes, yes,
Please, I'm very serious about this. We have been losing people left and right, higher incidences of people, checked out, tapped out, whatever. Um, and let us not forget, we are still on the heels of a major pandemic. The numbers are sadly going up again, as well as some other respiratory issues and factors that are coming in. And I want you all to be well, right? As well
absolutely.
as you possibly can be, moving towards optimal wellness. So
Yes,
that was my little soapbox about get thee to the doctor. And
wholeheartedly agree. Yes,
so, and if you could do eat one thing righter, right? Because we all about like, oh, I gotta get home, I gotta write this paper, I gotta do this, just gonna grab some drive through. Just one change can make a huge difference. And Dr. Armstrong, you know this because you are all, deeply planted into wellness. And so I appreciate you bringing up the doctor's visit.
Yes, yes, indeed.
So as we, round out our conversation, what are two practical things that you can leave folks with to move towards their purpose, productivity, and wellness?
Mhm. One of the things that I want to acknowledge is that as persons who are academic leaders, and when I say leader, I mean all levels of leadership. When you step in that classroom, when
Mhm.
you're an author on that paper, you're exhibiting leadership. So in our positions of leadership, we very much want to be able to affirm ourselves. And I know, having worked in an academic space where I was in the numerical minority, I
Mhm.
know that there are voices and glances and gazes and non-engagement,
Mhm.
all of which can really threaten your sense of self if you don't have that stability, if you are not grounded in who you truly are. So one thing that I would recommend to your audience is to create and also to engage in daily affirmations. Like
Mhm.
using affirmations as a way of reminding yourself, no matter what critique you received from that reviewer on your article that you've been trying to publish, and it just keeps getting
Rejected.
prolonged. Yes. Yes,
Yes.
rejected and prolonged in the process. You have to remember who you are and whose
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah.
So it's important to create those affirmations. And usually I advise my clients to look at those areas where maybe they have struggle in believing certain things about themselves. And sometimes the best affirmations come from taking those negative thoughts and flipping them,
Yes.
being able to say what what that mentor said, who did not mean good for me, what they said is completely the opposite of what is true about me. This is what is true about me. So affirmations would be
Mhm.
one of the things that I would advise. The second thing that I would advise is for persons who are in academia to remember that even though the academic experience can be isolating for some people, especially if you're in a phase where you're doing a lot of writing, you may or may not have a lot of access to uh, other engagement that is life-giving and life-promoting. And
Mhm.
so I want you to resist that and to remember to stay connected to your village. And
Mhm.
sometimes that village can be from the past. So I am fortunate enough to have returned back to my hometown. I have friends that I've known since we were in elementary school, and we still get together regularly. So I've got the old friends, and then I remind myself every time I go to a mixer, every time I'm networking with people, that these are also the potential colleagues that I may have long-term relationships with. And so I try to remember to keep myself open to new members of my village, and to test them, of course, to make sure that they can indeed belong in the village. So those are the two things that I would recommend that your listeners really pay attention to.
All right. So we have gotten some great tips from you today, wrapping it up with affirmations and connections, right?
Yes, yes.
All of these things will support and really undergird your productivity, purpose, wellness, and as you move through life, and not just in your academic career, but your journey. So I applaud you and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on today, Dr. Armstrong.
It has been a great pleasure. I love talking about these topics, so thank you for giving me another opportunity to do so.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you for tuning in today. I am Dr. Loren M. Hill, your academic career advancement coach, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing you the next time.